You're now his right-hand man, his go-to hitter, the rabid pit bull sleeping at the foot of his master's bed. Ironically, this is the most fulfilled you've ever felt, even if that happiness is built on a mountain of broken lives. You look in the mirror, and that innocent kid who used to draw stick-figure houses is gone. Instead, you see a monster in training. And the terrifying part? You're actually proud of the creature you've become, all just to snag a few crumbs of daddy's love. But every honeymoon phase has a shelf life. After a few years of father-son bonding through wet work, the novelty of having a hitman for a son starts to wear thin. You notice that warm glow of approval is icing over, replaced by the same bored meh expression that crushed your soul when you were a kid. Panic sets in. You aren't scared of catching a bullet. You're scared of becoming invisible again. You realize that if you don't evolve, you're just another disposable pawn on his chessboard. Brute force doesn't move the needle anymore. Any idiot can pull a trigger. To get back in his good graces, you need to show him something he doesn't have: modern business savvy. You ditch the old-school thuggery and pivot to high-stakes money laundering. You implement the most brilliant, ridiculous conspiracy of the modern world, a massive chain of mattress stores. Think about it, they're on every corner, always brightly lit. Yet you never see anyone actually buying a mattress. How do they pay the rent? You build an empire of ghost stores, moving millions in dirty cash under the guise of memory foam sales. When you show Dad the books clean, untouchable, and completely FBI-proof, he doesn't just smile. He looks at you with a new kind of respect, one that borders on fear. He finally gets it. You're not just his kid anymore. You're the brain that's going to keep this empire alive in the 21st century. Success tastes sweet, but in the drug trade, that sweetness is usually laced with cyanide. You walk into the Cartel's annual summit feeling like the Steve Jobs of organized crime. You're rocking an Italian suit that costs more than a suburban mortgage, just waiting for your coronation. Surrounded by the country's heaviest hitters, you're 100% sure Dad is finally going to announce that you are the genius behind the decade's most successful laundering operation. Dad stands up, raises his tequila glass, and calls for silence. Your heart is swelling with pride. But then his words hit you like a runaway freight train. He starts telling the story of his brilliant mattress store idea. He takes all the credit, every bit of it. He talks about his vision, his hustle, his genius. In his story, you aren't the architect. You're just the low-level contractor who followed blueprints. To twist the knife, he cracks a joke about you in front of everyone, reducing you to nothing but a good little errand boy. The room erupts in laughter. And that laughter, that's the sound of your loyalty evaporating in real time. In that moment, sitting there with a frozen fake smile, something inside you snaps for good. You realize that to him, you'll never be a partner. You'll always be a lackey. That lifelong idolization turns into a cold, clinical hatred. You don't want to impress him anymore. You don't want a hug. Now you're just staring at his exposed neck while he drinks, realizing that the only way to get the crown is to take it off his cold, dead head. Patricide doesn't sound like a sin anymore. It sounds like a well-deserved promotion. That public shaming was the final straw. You decide it's time for a hostile corporate takeover. That night, you walk through the mansion hallways toward Dad's office. You don't need to sneak around in the shadows or grease any palms. The elite bodyguard's paranoid guys who'd shoot their own reflection just nod as you pass. They open the door for you, 0 questions asked. Why would they doubt you? You're the prodigal son. The right hand. The literal extension of the boss's will. Dad's biggest blind spot wasn't a lack of security. It was his blind faith in the family first myth. You walk in without knocking. He looks up from his paperwork, probably expecting a sales report or a good night pop. But instead, he's staring down the dark barrel of your piece. The silence in the room is heavy enough to choke on. Remember how your hands shook in that damp basement when you were 13. That kid is dead and buried. Now your pulse is as steady and cold as a marble headstone. You look into the eyes of the man who gave you life and spent years sucking it back out of you with his contempt. No dramatic movie speeches. No soap opera tears. Just one dry final bang. The king is dead. Long live the new king. You sit in his leather chair, still warm from his body, and kick your boots up on the desk. You've got the empire. You've got absolute power. But as you look at his corpse, the reality sinks in. When you pulled that trigger, you didn't just kill him. You killed the very last scrap of humanity left in you. You've got the world at your feet, but the ground under your $1,000 boots is turning into quicksand. The DEA, the FBI, and Interpol kick off a global manhunt that makes high-octane action movies look like boring nature documentaries. And that's when you learn the first law of criminal physics. When the ship hits the iceberg, the rats don't just bail, they auction off the captain just to secure a seat on the lifeboat. Your ride-or-die lieutenants, the ones who swore they'd take a bullet for you while slamming back your tequila, are now in a dimly lit room, snitching like crazy, trading your exact GPS coordinates for a plea deal and a reduced sentence. You're all alone in a hollowed-out mansion that reeks of panic and burnt coffee. You've got billions buried in the jungle, but you can't even go on a Starbucks run without a Reaper drone tagging your location. You haven't slept in weeks because closing your eyes is a luxury you can't afford. Then it finally happens. The thunderous crash of a battering ram through your reinforced door. Flashbangs, red laser dots, and guys in tactical gear everywhere. But you don't reach for your piece. You don't get your Scarface blaze of glory moment. Instead, you just drop to your knees and put your hands up. When the cold steel of the cuffs bites into your wrists, you don't feel rage or terror. You feel this weird, overwhelming peace. For the first time in 40 years, you don't have to look over your shoulder. The hunt is over. And ironically, getting busted is the first time you've actually felt free. Ironically, Supermax becomes your sanctuary. You don't feel like some criminal mastermind who outsmarted the system. You just feel the simple, raw comfort of knowing that here, finally, you can eat a meal in peace and sleep without a Glock under your pillow. You feel strangely safe, surrounded by killers and monsters, thinking your war is finally over. Your new cellie seems like a total pushover. A scrawny, quiet dude who spends his days buried in books and barely says a word. But in the dead of night, you wake up to rough hands clamping down on your windpipe. As the air leaves your lungs, you hear a whisper dripping with pure, concentrated hate. My father was your 13th birthday present. Your apex predator instinct kicks in instantly. You're a kingpin. You've ended hundreds. You could snap this kid's wrists like toothpicks and keep breathing. You raise your hands to defend yourself, but then under the faint moonlight, you see his eyes. And you freeze. You don't see an enemy. You're looking at a mirror. It's you at 13, shaking with fear, pain, and rage. Suddenly, a memory hits you, that weird, peaceful look on your father's face the day you killed him. You didn't get it then, but now it's crystal clear. He didn't lose. He let you win just to punch his ticket out of this hellhole. You realize this is your exit ramp. You decide you've had enough. You drop your guard. You stop fighting. You accept that this is the perfect twisted ending to your miserable life. Your cellmate watches you take your final breath, completely haunted by the serene smile left on your dead face. The cycle is closed for you, but for him, the timer just started.